Sydney is an aspiring entrepreneur from Los Angeles who has always had a special passion for giraffes and neck rings. She was particularly obsessed with the Kayan people from the Southeast Asian region. So one day, she thought she could transform this very specific liking into something that would allow her to finally distinguish herself from the crowds of Los Angeles. But before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. She wasn't afraid, though she knew that what she was about to do would probably receive some mixed responses from the people who lived around her. Yet she went for it. She slowly began adding brass rings around her neck, with the intent of eventually wearing them as the Kayan people did. That was the beginning of Sydney's unique story. She had a dream and was ready to go to great lengths to fulfill it, and that's exactly what she did. It took her about 5 years to complete the task of adding 5 brass rings to her neck, which had become one of her most important symbols of beauty. She had dreamt of being known for this before the age of 30 while becoming some sort of icon. So, though she took her time with the process, she wanted the world to know that she was unique, and this would be done not only through her passion for brass rings, but also by eventually becoming a giraffe woman. Since she was a little girl, Sydney absolutely loved reading. One of her favorite themes were the different tribes around the world, but she was especially fond of women from specific tribes in the South Asia region. Once, she was reading a National Geographic magazine when she came across several pictures of women who wore rings around their necks. The custom was a symbolic gesture to make their necks longer. When girls would reach puberty, they were expected to begin their ring journey by placing a ring on their necks one at a time. The more she read about it, the more Sydney believed that this specific custom was her symbolic journey to beauty. Her obsession with neck rings didn't make her fascination with giraffes disappear, though. Something about a giraffe's pattern was completely hypnotizing for Sydney, which resulted in a wardrobe that was full of animal prints, especially the ones of a giraffe. In fact, anyone who knew her knew that one of her favorite things to do was to head to the local zoo and to stare for hours at the majestic giraffes there. So she thought, why not combine both of her passions? She loved neck rings and long necks. What could possibly be more perfect? She often thought about the time she went to her parents to voice her passions. She started doing so when she was very little, but unfortunately, her parents didn't really give much attention to it. She was a determined little girl and knew from the get-go that she couldn't give up on her dreams so easily. She would often stand in front of the mirror while wearing a bunch of cheap wires around her neck, wondering what it would look like if she actually wore the neck rings. And though this seemed like a silly obsession for her parents at the time, they would eventually realize that it was much more than that. Before we get into the juicy parts of this story, perhaps it's important to understand the real meaning behind the custom of having long necks. For the woman of the Kayan Lahui tribe, this custom comes from a long line of tradition that has passed from generation to generation. Every single girl who is a part of the tribe is expected to follow this tradition, and they start early. Some women continue to add the neck rings one at a time as they grow older, and when they do, they have to be very careful to not crush their collarbones. And the women don't just wear the rings when they're out and about, they are also required to wear them at night. The illusion of having a longer neck is instantly created due to the way the rings are placed, but in truth, the collarbone is the one that is pushed down and affected by the custom. Each of these women's ribcage is compressed while deforming the clavicle. Though there are different theories amongst different tribes around the reason why women wear neck rings, one of these theories involves making women less attractive. In the early days, it is said that tribal men would often kidnap beautiful women from neighboring tribes. So these tribes decided to include this custom to protect their women from being kidnapped. Though the previous theory is definitely compelling, it is a little bit contradictory to what others say, which involves the rings and the long neck making women more attractive. In some tribes, the rings are used to make a woman resemble a dragon, which is believed to promote a sort of sensual and unique appeal to the women who wear them. This was the theory that Sydney held on to. She would wear a makeshift ring everywhere when she was younger, even to school. Her school friends eventually nicknamed her the Giraffe Girl, which she loved. Though she liked the recognition she was getting at school for her uniqueness, she wanted more. Her goal was to nail a front-page picture in a magazine, taking things to another level. That was when she felt it was time to move from her makeshift rings to the real deal. But her family and friends often brought up some concerns. They would ask her why she was so fixated with the rings and the giraffe persona. Why couldn't she just be herself? But in Sydney's mind, they didn't understand. The pain made sense to her, though she did sometimes doubt if her beliefs really did make sense. But one day, her icon, Lady Gaga, wore a dress made of meat to a concert she once attended. That inspired Sydney to wear whatever she believed in, since her own icon had done so. With new courage found in herself, Sydney was ready to say goodbye to the makeshift rings and to welcome the real thing. She was so ready to bring out her inner giraffe. In fact, she had been born ready. In order to make this change, she turned to one of her friends. She began in 2011 with just a few customized rings around her neck. Though she really wanted to make things work, the rings were much more painful than she thought they would be. Unfortunately, though, she was aware that in order to reach her goals and her dream, the process would be somewhat painful, and she was ready for it. So instead of giving up, Sydney took the pain as a challenge and a sign that all she had to do was persevere. She didn't care about what anyone thought of her. She had customized rings made especially for her neck whenever she needed them. And because she wanted to achieve goals faster, she didn't exactly follow the same route that the tribal women did. The women usually start when they are young girls, giving them some time to adapt, but Sydney couldn't wait any longer. Instead of having 10 years to adapt to her new situation, she did it all in just a couple of months. Every 6 months, Sydney would go ahead and add another ring to her neck. Though it was incredibly painful, she kept pushing it all in the name of her dream. After a few years, she finally managed to get to 10 inches. Soon, she would be able to reach a foot's length, which was one of her main goals. But with all of that pain, would she be able to bear 5 pounds of weight pressing down her collarbone? The ambition was definitely there, but did she have what it took both physically and emotionally? With all of that determination, there was a thing that Sydney really wanted to achieve: fame and recognition for her interesting life choices. Though the tribal costume of elongating one's neck through rings was known in many places around the world, the custom wasn't particularly known in Los Angeles. So naturally, Sydney started really standing out whenever she walked in the streets of LA. People would constantly stretch their necks, pun intended, to see who the woman with the neck rings was. She liked to share every single part of her progress with her friends and family, so she regularly uploaded her life to her social media channels. In no time, news outlets began picking up her story and sharing it on their own channels. People were completely fascinated with her unique story. Journalists started slowly approaching her to get more details about her choices, which started opening the doors to fame she had longed for a really long time. In a couple of months, Sydney became famous worldwide, earning the nickname Giraffe Woman for her distinctive neck rings. Modeling agencies took an interest in her unique look, and she began receiving invitations to model for various brands. However, fame brought criticism as well. Some people accused her of using the rings for attention rather than authenticity, believing she was disrespecting the tribe that traditionally practiced this custom. This judgment followed her as she traveled the world, causing her to question her choices. Though the rings opened many doors for Sydney, they soon began to take over her life. Simple activities like shopping, driving, or even walking became difficult. She found herself avoiding public spaces and staying home to escape the constant attention. Sydney had to face the reality that her passion for the rings was compromising her daily life and well-being. Her other interests, such as running, swimming, and hiking, became increasingly difficult due to the lack of freedom of movement. Financially, she struggled to keep up with the expenses of her new lifestyle. While modeling provided some income, it wasn't enough, and Sydney realized she needed to make a change. The attention she received wasn't about her as a person. People only cared about the rings, posing for photos, and sharing them online. Her privacy was invaded, and her personal life, including her love life, was affected. As Sydney's life spiraled into isolation, she found herself jobless and depressed with no clear path forward. After struggling to find work, she finally got a job in a kitchen, but it was physically taxing due to the discomfort caused by her neck rings. Her personal life, especially dating, suffered, as men were more interested in her rings than in her as a person. Some even complained about the smell of the rings, or asked her to remove them before meeting their families. Sydney soon realized the physical toll the rings were taking on her body. The doctor she consulted warned her that removing the rings after years of wear could cause her neck to snap due to the lack of support. Her ribcage and collarbones were becoming increasingly damaged. Despite her love for the rings, Sydney knew she had to make a decision to save her health. After multiple tests, the doctors confirmed her fears. The rings were seriously harming her. Sydney finally made the decision to remove them. With the help of a friend, they used a chemical to melt the brass and remove the rings permanently. The process was painful, but she knew it was the right choice for her future. Though her neck remained longer than before, doctors assured her it would return to its normal size with physical therapy. Despite the pain, Sydney doesn't regret her decision. She's now living a healthier life with her husband and daughter, proud of the choice she made to reclaim her body and her life.